So now you've decided that you want to possibly take a GLP-1. I want you to get your insurance card out. I want you to call the 800 number on the back of your insurance card, and I want you to ask them, do I have weight management coverage? An hour ago, I just got an email telling me that it was denied. And now you're telling me it's approved for a year based on what? You get that approval, which is good for a year. You are going to have to file for a continuation of coverage. The very best part about being on this medication, by far, hands down, is the self-confidence. I've talked about it numerous times, over and over again, and every single step of this journey makes it mean that much more at the end. You're always going to find people that have, negative things to say, and that could be for multiple reasons. One, because everybody else is doing it, right? Or two, they're not familiar with the medications. It's easier for them to just dump on it. Three, I will go out on a limb here and say that 60 to 70% of the people that have negative outlooks of these medications is because of media. It is. It is. They don't publish articles of people who hit their goal weight, people who lost 240 pounds and just celebrated the fact that they're not on blood pressure medications and the fact that they're not on cholesterol medications anymore. The fact that my friend Rachel couldn't have a baby for almost 2 decades because her PCOS was so out of control, and Rachel just gave birth. He's a month old. Nobody ever celebrates the milestones. They want to talk about why you shouldn't do this. I wanted to start this podcast mainly because I wanted to be one of the first people to come to you in every single way I could and tell you why you should do this. Why should you? There are multiple reasons. One of them being, for some of you, just like myself, I truly deep down feel like this is my only chance. This was it. I had literally tried everything else I could possibly think of, from medication to exercise to fad diets to almost unhealthy options. And I'm here to tell you that this was the end of the line for me. This was it. But the good Lord above made sure to weave this into my everyday life. I was so sick on metformin. I was done. When I went to the doctor's office and he said he was putting me on this medication, I said, "What is it called?" Oh my gosh, I can't even say that. And here I am, 2.5 years later. Everything is perfectly synchronized. Wouldn't be here today if I didn't trust the process. So thank you, metformin, for making me so sick. People stop me and they say, okay, what are your secrets? What are your secrets on these medications? What are some things we need to do? Focus on protein. Focus on protein. Get a good amount of fiber. All of these supplements and things, they're going to market them to whoever they think is going to buy them. But initially, what it boils down to at the end of the day is, what do I need as far as like, what products do I need that aid me in not being constipated, that give me energy when I feel run down? What helps me get all my water in? These are the things I want you to focus on, because moving forward, those are the things that are going to help you reach the successful point that you're trying to get to. One of the most important things I think needs to be addressed is the whole prior authorization process. It is never an easy subject to talk about the prior authorization approval denial process because, first of all, insurance companies don't want to pay. I talk about this pretty frequently, But let's take it a step further. Now companies are coming out and they are dropping all GLP-1 coverage at the rollout of the new year. So essentially, you're not even getting to that point. Companies are coming out and they're like, "Nah, we're going to send a letter. We're not going to cover these moving forward." And that's terrible. It is, because if you have type 2 diabetes, you have a list of different medications that you can take to control that disease. And GLP-1 medications are being removed because at the end of the day, let's just be real, because you can experience other side effects from these medications, like weight loss. People say, no, that's not it. It's because they're expensive. Why are they expensive? They don't have to be. We know what they cost. We know what they cost. So if the problem is how much money that they are upcharged, so to speak, wouldn't it make more sense not to upcharge them so much? I mean, it would to me. That's where the problem lies. But okay. So companies are now coming out and they're like, we're not going to cover it. But the companies that are willing to cover these medications are also making the prior authorization process a little bit more difficult, whether this medication is prescribed for weight loss or it's prescribed for type 2 diabetes and or written off label for different things. They're not going to make it easy. That's guaranteed. It will never be across the board easy. They're going to put up a fight. So now you've decided that you want to possibly take a GLP-1. This is what this is going to look like for you moving forward. So if you're one of those people and you want to know how to get this covered, or if you even have the coverage, this is where you start. This is point A right here. The first thing I want you to do is, before you even make an appointment, a doctor's appointment, and you go, take off work and you go through the process of trying to get your insurance to pay for these medications, or even to figure out if your insurance is willing to, if you have weight management coverage, I want you to get your insurance card out. I want you to call the 800 number on the back of your insurance card, and I want you to ask them, do I have weight management coverage? That's it. That's where you start. Here's why. If your insurance does not have weight management coverage, you will not ever, ever, ever be able to get coverage for Wegovy, which is semaglutide and or Ozempic, but that's, for weight loss, or Zepbound. Zepbound is the dual agonist medication Mounjaro, tirzepatide, dosed the same, goes up to the same amount of milligrams, essentially identical, exact same as Mounjaro. The only difference is it is named something different and marketed for weight loss. Okay. First thing you have to do is you have to call your insurance company. Do I have weight management coverage? If they say no, you do not have weight management coverage, usually it's an exclusion. So what does that mean? Does that mean your doctor can't write a prescription for a weight managed medication or a weight loss medication? No. That means that your insurance will not ever provide coverage because it does not cover it. It does not have an allowance for it. You do not pay into it. If the answer from your insurance company is no, we do not provide you don't have weight management coverage, then you ask them, in order to get a prior authorization approval for Mounjaro, which is a dual agonist medication. But it's, like I said earlier, if you don't have weight management coverage, you'll never get Zepbound. So you're moving forward with Mounjaro, tirzepatide. You say, do I have step therapy? That's really important to ask that question. Step therapy, because what that looks like is you have to try 3 things on your formulary and either fail at or not be able to take those, whether it's because you got a rash or whether it's because of the severe nausea, whatever it is. You have to have tried and failed at three uh, of the approved medications on your formulary in order for them to even consider adding that to your formulary and or approving that medication, which is exactly what happened in my case. I want you to understand that moving forward, if you want the dual agonist medication, Mounjaro, Zepbound, tirzepatide, that is how you would have to go about that. And that, again, would be you have to call your insurance company and ask them if there is any coverage for weight management medications, such as Wegovy or Zepbound. If they say no, then you have to proceed with Mounjaro and or Ozempic. It's going to be a little bit more difficult, only for the simple reason that this day and age, it's a little bit more difficult to get coverage for those medications because they carry the indication of type 2 diabetes. And even though it doesn't have to be an across the board type 2 diabetes, diagnosis, some insurance companies will automatically use that as a default. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to cover that medication because you do not have type 2 diabetes. When in fact, my insurance company said the same thing, but at the end of the day, I had something called step therapy. Step therapy. You have to try 3 things already approved and or allocated for on the formulary and fail at or not be able to continue the journey on those medications before they will ever consider covering the medication that you are requesting coverage for, which would be a formulary exception, which is what I had to get. It wasn't enough to get a prior authorization approval. Mounjaro was never on my formulary, ever. So not only did I need them to add it to my formulary and approve my prior authorization, I needed them to approve a formulary exception. And that was just overwhelming, but it happened and it got approved. I got 3 denials. I must have called the 800 number 6 or 8 times. But at the end of the day, I stuck with it because I knew I qualified. I met all the criteria. And it did get approved. So you got the coverage. You verified the coverage is there. You went as far as to submit the prior authorization paperwork, whether it's the medical assistant, the doctor, the nurse practitioner, whoever it is. Say the prior authorization is approved. Then you're 1 year in. You're going to have to file for a continuation of coverage, right? So what does that mean? That means that 1 year, if it's like Mounjaro or Ozempic, 1 year of coverage. About 11 months after you get that approval, which is good for a year, you are going to have to file for a continuation of coverage or a continuation of care. I've heard it, talked about multiple different ways. Just so you know, if it is a weight managed medication like Zepbound or Wegovy, it's not that it's impossible to get a 1 year coverage, because it's not. We know that from being on social media. Gail Lawson, she is an absolute saint. I adore her. She is a provider out of Frisco, Allen, Texas. She does these all day long, every day. She works with high risk prior authorizations. And yeah, she's, here lately had a bunch of 1 year approvals. It used to be a thing of the past, or not so much a thing of the past. It used to not exist. It was like a 6-month approval process for a lot of people. And that was, frustrating also, because at that 6-month mark, they then check and, Susie Q, patient over here, had only lost this amount of weight, but now their BMI is within, it's at the end of it, but it's within a reasonable range, and boom, you're off the med. it was happening. And that is just upsetting because I don't think the insurance companies want people to play into the fact that you're taking a medication that treats things inside the body. If you weren't treating a lot of those processes that were, haywire and not running correctly, the result would not be what it is on these medications. We know that. The insurance companies, like, we're only going to pay for it if you meet the criteria, but we're going to make it so hard for you that only a handful of people are going to be. It's upsetting, it's frustrating, it's aggravating. But don't give up. But don't give up because that's what they're expecting. That is what they're expecting. Just hang in there because it's worth it. I promise it's worth it. And it seems like, you know, just one of those things where you're like, damn, I am never going to you'll get there. You'll get there. Just don't give up. Another thing that people are constantly asking me when it comes down to insurance is, how do I know if the insurance that I am going with is going to help me continue my journey on this medication? Vice versa. Like, is it going to be affordable? First of all, not everybody realizes there's multiple different deductibles, right? You've got your standard deductible for your plan, but there's also a pharmacy deductible for a lot of people, and they don't realize it. A friend of mine, Amanda, she was actually a patient at the dental office that obviously a family dental office that I worked at for years and years before we sold it. And she said, I just picked a plan that was affordable. It did have a deductible, but it was definitely something that I could take care of throughout the year. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever think to check for the pharmacy deductible, the deductible on medications. Sometimes and quite often, they are different than the deductible that you would pay for using the different plan coverages. So pay attention to that also, because that can also be very tricky and confusing. At the end of the day, what you're trying to find is you want to stay with the same network of doctors, but you also want to make it to where your insurance will allow you to continue your journey on these medications affordably. There is hope. There are, insurance plans that you can choose that are a little bit easier than most. When I talked to my brother's wife about this here recently, my brother is retired Navy. She said, TRICARE is awful. It is absolutely horrible. I said, TRICARE is great. If you are the one wanting coverage, they're terrific. On covering GLP-1 medications, they're difficult. All right. Are they impossible? No. Do they want to cover it? No. TRICARE is really difficult when it comes to covering these medications, but it's great insurance. It really is. Also reference when men, women, active military, whatever, when they would come in, they would pay next to nothing out of pocket. TRICARE would cover almost all of it. TRICARE is good insurance. Not so much with GLP-1 coverage, but at the end of the day, not a total bummer. It's just going to require a little bit more fight with TRICARE. And hold on, it is the same thing that I went for or had to deal with United Healthcare. People message me and they're like, how did you got denied 3 times? Yep. And then they put you in a 6-month timeout. Yep. What does that mean anyway? They put you in a timeout. That means that they literally sent a denial pamphlet in a booklet in a sealed large white envelope, and it said, you cannot reapply before April the 17th, 2023. And if you do, it will be an automatic denial of coverage requested. And I said, it's almost humorous because I am asking my insurance to cover something that was prescribed by a doctor for borderline type 2 diabetes, A1C related, and multiple different things that fit inside what was necessary to have this medication covered. I met the criteria. and they still refused because they kicked it back to the doctor and said that this medication has not been approved. It was not on my formulary, and that they wanted me to try 3 different things on my formulary first, when we indicated that we, in fact, had already done 3, actually 4 medications. Um, they still didn't request more information. They just denied it. And that's where we're at this day and age. They're just going to turn you down and maybe ask questions later. It wasn't until we went in with some paperwork from Maximus, which is like, I believe, a federal insurance review board. But I absolutely fell in love with the ladies that work there. They were part of the approval and or peer review department. I had already reached out to them and said, my name is Jennifer, gave them all my information, told them what I was dealing with, said I'm not really sure if it's actually OptumRx, which is the formulary company, or if it's United Healthcare. Spent some time on the phone with them, and they informed me that as soon as I submitted all the, as soon as I submitted all the documentation requested and it had been reviewed, to reach back out to them and let them know what the result was, and that if I needed anything at all, that here's a direct number and an email for so-and-so. And I was like, wow. And that's exactly what happened. I got denied. I immediately reached out, sent an email, carbon copied that to my provider and myself. And I got a phone call an hour later telling me that it had been approved for 1 year. I was shocked. Like, an hour ago, I just got an email telling me that it was denied. And now you're telling me it's approved for a year based on what? What was the deciding factor? Like what? None of the health history changed. None of the labs changed. None of the important information changed. What company we were working with at that point changed. The minute that we said we switched over and, we were working with Maximus, everything changed. So I don't know what kind of pull that company had, but I just think it's a sham. It's embarrassing. The fact that it has to come to this is ridiculous. It really is. I pay you for insurance. You don't have to cover every single thing I'm asking you to cover, but to make a recommendation, basically putting your hand out and here, I think you should go with, you're not a doctor, but you're trumping a doctor. It just never has quite sat right with me. It doesn't make sense. There's some things that need to change for sure. In managed care, there's some things that need to change. Yeah. A friend of mine's son, I know this is a little off, but think about it this way. A friend of mine's son has asthma. He's 2.5 years old, and his asthma is so severe that he has to wear a mask on over his face when he goes outside, period. They had to move from California. They now live in Minnesota next to her parents. But he's never even been able to go to school, like daycare. Never even been able to go to daycare because they're afraid that he'll exert too much. I mean, this is like super crazy, right? To hear this. Never at one point do I think my friend would have been okay with somebody saying, it's probably not in the best interest of your son to go to daycare and exert so much, energy, because he might not be able to breathe, and it could be this or that. But go, what? I mean, forget what the doctor's saying. We're just going to tell you, don't worry about it. And never once, ever would that have been okay. And it's the same thing with these medications. Somebody who works for an insurance company is trumping a doctor. And if we don't care, like what these doctors are writing these prescriptions for, like seriously, because that's where we're at. It really isn't in the grand scheme of things. If somebody with no medical background is trumping what a doctor is saying, doing, or the prescription that they're writing, you clearly don't care about what they're prescribing this for, because it could be life-saving. Could be. It is whenever you're talking about sleep apnea, when you're talking about addiction, when you're talking about different things. It is life-changing. It is to save lives. But yet, a doctor's word is up for debate. It's not good enough. I'm not okay with that. There's a lot of reasons why it's a constant fight and it's exhausting to get these medications. And then you have the best of both worlds because you have a compound version, so you have less side effects. Amble has been a saving grace for so many people. It really has. To be able to offer these medications at such a reduced cost and put these medications in the hands of people who would ordinarily never be able to use these medications to change their life, it's not always about weight. And that's what, do you know how many people out there have diabetes and they don't have insurance? There's a lot of them. There's a lot. They reach out to me all the time. They deserve a chance too. They do. So at the end of the day, you want to say this can't be about money. You can't afford to get these medications because you don't have insurance. You can't even afford to go to the doctor. But you could use a telehealth and get a version, a compounded version of this medication prescribed. And you might be able to manage that from month to month, but someone is about to step in and take that ability away from you because they're not making enough money off of you. That's crazy. It's crazy and it's sad. But that's the world that we live in right now. And I definitely hope things change.